Are you a target? Psalm 5's divine prayer, your shield against enemies, gossip, and strife. Are you under attack? Do you ever feel like the world is closing in on you? As though you're the target of relentless negativity, baseless gossip, or even intentional harm? Maybe it's the whispers of criticism in a workplace, the sting of betrayal in a personal relationship, or the overwhelming feeling that unseen forces are working against you. These moments leave us questioning how we can protect ourselves, not just externally, but deep within our spirit, where these wounds often leave lasting marks. It's in times like these that we search for something greater, shield, strong enough to block the arrows of life's challenges. And here's the truth, you already have that shield. Psalm 5, a divine prayer spoken by King David, holds the blueprint for protection when strife feels too heavy to bear. More than just words on a page, Psalm 5 is a cry of faith, resilience, and trust in a God who not only defends, but restores. Let me ask you this, what if you weren't just a victim of the chaos around you? What if these attacks, perceived or real, were opportunities to step into a greater reality where you're no longer defenseless, no longer at the mercy of gossip, slander, or negativity? What if the very storm threatening to overtake you became a doorway to deeper peace, divine clarity, and the undeniable presence of God in your life? This is not just another reflection on faith. This is a call to arms, but not the kind of arms the world wields. Psalm 5 invites you to exchange fear for trust, anger for surrender, and self-reliance for a divine partnership with the one who promises to be your shield. Today, I'm taking you on a journey into David's cry for protection and justice, and how this ancient prayer is more relevant than ever in today's emotionally charged and chaotic world. Together, we'll break down the layers of Psalm 5, its emotional depth and spiritual calls to action, and uncover its enduring power to protect and uplift. But here's the secret. This is not about passive hope. It's a roadmap for moving through the trials you face every day. Whether it's dealing with an unkind word, facing a tide of negativity, or navigating your own inner struggles, you don't have to fight alone, because Psalm 5 reminds us that God fights for you, even when you feel overwhelmed and outnumbered. So stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll set the stage for why Psalm 5 remains a timeless shield against life's fears and conflicts. If you've ever felt like you needed more than your own strength to get by, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The power of Psalm 5. David's life was a battlefield, not just of armies, but of emotions, relationships, and betrayals. Imagine for a moment the weight he carried. A king chosen by God, but constantly surrounded by enemies, some visible, others hidden in the shadows. David didn't only face opposition from his foes. Sometimes it came from his own people, those closest to him, those he trusted. The sting of betrayal, the whispering of slander, the weight of expectation, these weren't unique to David's time. They're struggles we still face today, though the arenas may have changed. This is where Psalm 5 takes us, into the heart of a man grappling with immense external pressure and overwhelming internal strife. The beauty of this psalm lies in its raw humanity. You can feel the ache in David's words, but also the unshakable trust that anchors him. He doesn't suppress his fear or deny the injustice around him. Instead, he does what many of us forget to do. He brings it all to God. David begins Psalm 5 by calling out to God first thing in the morning. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. He wakes not in defeat, but in decision. The decision to direct his focus to God before the day's troubles overwhelm him. This act of starting the day with prayer isn't just symbolic. It's strategic. It's a reminder that when you're facing battles, whether external or internally, you can't afford to carry the weight alone. The fights of our lives don't start when someone speaks ill of us or circumstances challenge us. They start the moment we open our eyes, before the day truly begins. David understood this, and his cry to God isn't the pleading of a man with no hope. It's the confident prayer of someone who knows where his victory comes from. But Psalm 5 isn't just about protection. It's about perspective. David acknowledges the existence of evil, but he doesn't dwell on it. Not a word from their mouth can be trusted. Their heart is filled with malice. He is aware of the malice aimed at him, of the lies, of the deception, but he doesn't allow it to consume him. Instead, he turns those concerns over to God, a God who sees every injustice, every wound, every betrayal. David doesn't deny the difficulty of his situation, but he also refuses to let it dictate his actions or beliefs. This psalm forces us to ask the question, what do we do when we feel like a target? When gossip surrounds us, when relationships fracture, when negativity weighs us down, it's so easy to allow bitterness and self-reliance to cloud our hearts. But David shows us an alternative path. He reminds us that these moments of hardship are not meant to strengthen the grip of fear, but to loosen our grip on trying to control what only God can handle. Psalm 5 doesn't just speak to kings and warriors. Its wisdom reaches into the lives of people living in the chaos of today. Workplace gossip, passive-aggressive texts, unspoken tension among friends, these are the battles of modern life. David's prayer might have been written in ancient times, but its truth is eternal. You don't fight these battles alone. The enemies we face today may not carry swords, but their words still cut deep. The challenges before us may not be ambushes on a battlefield, but they can feel just as overwhelming. Psalm 5 brings us clarity. It reminds us to redirect our focus from the external to the eternal, to stop magnifying the voices of those who sow confusion and turn instead to the voice of God. David doesn't ask for his enemies to disappear. He asks for God's righteousness, for his protection, for his guidance. And that's the heart of Psalm 5. This isn't about retreating from the world or avoiding conflict. It's about leaning on God to equip us with everything we need to stand firm, to trust that justice belongs to Him, and to walk forward in peace even when surrounded by strife. When we pray Psalm 5, we're joining David in more than his plea for protection. We're stepping into his perspective shaped not by fear of darkness, but by trust in the light of God's presence. In the next topic, we'll uncover how the negativity of gossip, slander, and judgment isn't just an external threat. It's a battlefield for your soul and your peace. But more importantly, we'll explore how you can guard your heart, respond with grace, and move through these challenges with divine clarity. The battlefield within, how gossip and negativity harm the soul. What is it about gossip and negativity that feels so deeply cutting? On the surface, they seem like small, passing things, words carried on the air, uttered in private conversations or insidious social whispers. But their impact often strikes far deeper than we realize. These aren't just innocent exchanges or idle chatter. When you're the target of judgment or slander, they begin to feel like invisible arrows, creating cracks in your confidence, your peace, and even your faith. Gossip has an extraordinary ability to linger. It circulates like a shadow, shaping perceptions, hurting reputations, and isolating individuals. But the true damage often isn't external, it is internal. Gossip and negativity don't just leave you questioning others, they leave you questioning yourself. Maybe you start wondering if there's truth in the words circulating about you. Maybe you even carry the words home, replaying them in quiet moments, allowing them to settle into your spirit like a stain that won't come out. This is the danger of gossip. It isn't loud and it isn't obvious. It's sneaky and subtle, chipping away at your emotional and spiritual foundation one whisper at a time. Then there's judgment and criticism, which are equally damaging. You might hear them directly or indirectly, but either way, they have the power to make you feel inadequate, unworthy, or rejected. And yet the deeper issue is this: when gossip, slander, or negativity take root in your life, they don't just harm your mind or your emotions, they harm your spirit. They pull you out of alignment with the truth of who God says you are. You begin to live with the weight of other people's opinions, other people's labels, and other people's judgments. Isn't that exhausting? Carrying the voices of so many when the only thing that truly matters is the voice of God. Negativity thrives in this battlefield within. Your inner world, the thoughts you harbor, the emotions you nurse, the doubts you feed becomes a breeding ground for fear, anger, and resentment. This is precisely how the enemy works. Using negativity as his ammunition, he plants seeds that encourage distancing yourself from your own peace and purpose. The Bible repeatedly warns about the power of words. Proverbs 18:21 says, "The tongue has the power of life and death." Think about that. Words can breathe life into someone's soul or tear it apart. They can encourage healing or instill hurt. But the same is true for the words we replay in our own minds. Part of the harm of gossip and negativity is not just what others say, but how we internalize those things and repeat them back to ourselves. That's where the deepest wounds are inflicted, and it's why guarding yourself from harm must begin in your own heart. Psalm 5 doesn't just acknowledge the reality of external opposition. It focuses on the way trusting God counteracts those threats. While David speaks of his enemies' lies and destruction, he ultimately shifts the narrative toward hope. That's intentional. He recognizes that dwelling on negativity only amplifies the pain. He chooses to redirect his thoughts and his spirit toward God, who isn't influenced by human deception or malice. That's the lesson Psalm 5 brings to us today. The ability to choose who has control of your mind and heart. When someone slanders you or a negative voice steals your peace, your immediate reaction might be to fight back or let the pain fester. But the psalm gives us another option, one that removes the power of gossip, slander, and judgment by handing it over to God. The psalm also teaches us the importance of proactive protection. David opens his prayer with urgency, crying out in the morning. Why? Because prayer is preparation. It's the armor you put on before the day begins. It guards your heart, keeping it rooted in God's truth, so that when negativity shows up, and it doesn't take hold of you. Prayer becomes your shield, not just a passive request, but active protection against the subtle ways negativity seeks to enter your soul. Modern psychology supports this spiritual truth. Science has shown that dwelling on negative thoughts amplifies their potency, rewiring your brain to focus more on fear and doubt. But gratitude and trusty themes in David's prayer essentially override that process. They release calming chemicals like serotonin and dopamine, which counteract stress and refocus the mind on things that heal instead of harm. This isn't just emotional protection, it's spiritual grounding. When you guard your heart like David, you aren't just holding back the tide of negativity. You're creating a space for God to step in and fight for you. Psalm 5:12 says, "For you bless the righteous, O Lord. You cover them with favor as with a shield." That shield is available to you right now. It's a reminder that you don't need to sit in bitterness or fear. You have a defender who never leaves you unprotected. You don't have to replay the hurtful moments. You don't have to let damaging words define you. In the next topic, we'll explore the most poignant verses of Psalm 5, dissecting how their divine wisdom provides clarity and actionable steps for protecting not just your mind, but your soul. We'll delve deeper into the tools God gives you to stand firm, allowing His promises to strengthen your faith and transform your perspective. The divine shield, breaking down Psalm 5's key verses. Psalm 5 isn't merely a collection of poetic phrases. It is a lifeline for anyone who has ever felt exposed, vulnerable, or under constant attack. David, the man after God's own heart, hands us tools, not abstract ideas, but actionable truths to fortify ourselves against the bitterness, strife, and pain the world throws at us. When we peel back the layers of this psalm, what emerges is nothing less than a blueprint for divine protection. The first verse captures David's urgency and his complete reliance on God. "Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my sighing. Listen to my cry for help, my King and my God. For to you I pray." This is not the casual prayer of habitudes, the desperate, unguarded plea of a man who knows his strength is not enough. There is no pretense here, no rehearsed spiritual jargon. Instead, David lays bare his heart, exposing the rawness of his need and the depth of his trust. God, in David's eyes, isn't a distant deity, but an intimate king, a protector who listens and responds. These opening verses remind us that prayer does not have to be polished. It just has to be honest. David continues, "In the morning, O Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly." The morning is significant here. It's a moment when doubts haven't hardened into fears, and the energy of the day hasn't yet been consumed by distractions. David knows that the battles of life aren't won in crisis, they're won through preparation. By committing his concerns to God at the very start of the day, he makes a deliberate act of surrender. This is a spiritual discipline often lost in a world buzzing with notifications, rushed coffee, and the hum of obligations. But Psalm 5 calls us to pause, to wake each morning with the spiritual intention of shielded living. The psalm then contrasts the wicked and the righteous, reminding us that the divine shield is not given indiscriminately, but to those who honor and follow God. You are not a God who delights in wickedness. Evil may not dwell with you. This verse shifts our focus outward and inward. It reminds us that negativity, whether in the form of gossip, judgment, or self-righteousness, pulls us further from God's presence. Wickedness, no matter how subtle it seems, has no place within God's protection. What's remarkable here is how deliberate David is in drawing lines between himself and these destructive forces. You destroy those who tell lies. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men the Lord abhors. David does not let himself be defined by the negativity surrounding him. Instead, he ensures that his identity is rooted in his relationship with God, not in the accusations or attacks of others. For modern-day believers, this is a transformative reminder. We cannot always control how others treat us, but we can control whether we allow their actions to shape our spiritual foundation. Then comes one of the most hopeful phrases in all of Scripture, "But I, by your great mercy, will come into your house. In reverence, I will bow down toward your holy temple." David is showing us that access to God's presence, to his shield of protection, isn't earned by perfection, but is a gift of mercy. It's not about being flawless. It's about being faithful enough to keep returning to God as your source of safety and strength. Even in the midst of strife, whether it's external conflict or internal battle, you are invited to approach God in reverence and trust. Now we turn to one of the most vivid images of divine protection in the entire book. "Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield." In ancient battles, Shields were crucial, not just for protection, but for identity. Soldiers carried shields marked by their allegiance, proclaiming their loyalty to a kingdom or ruler. In the same way, God's shield of favor is not just a protective device, it is a declaration that you belong to Him. When you walk in righteousness, God's shield doesn't just block harmful attacks, it proclaims to the world and to your enemies that you are under divine guardianship. But notice something crucial here. David's trust in the shield is not passive. He doesn't simply sit back and wait for God to act. He aligns himself with the will of God, asking, "Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies, make your way straight before me." David understands that the shield isn't an excuse to remain stagnant. It's a call to actively walk in alignment with God's path, trusting that His guidance will create clarity in the midst of confusion. This is where the psalm becomes deeply practical for us in modern life. Do we wake each day with a deliberate focus to align our steps with God's straight path, or are we reacting to life's challenges in fear and chaos? Do we seek His righteousness, or do we only ask for relief from our troubles without changing the way we live? Psalm 5 is both a prayer and an instruction manual. It shows us how to prepare for negativity, whether it's gossip, betrayal, or the daily struggles we all face. It teaches us to start the day in surrender and to let God's shield of favor define us, rather than the words or actions of others. It reminds us that while battles may come, the ultimate victory belongs to God. In the next section, we'll dive even deeper into this concept of divine favor and shield, exploring how God is not only your protector, but also your just judge. You'll see how releasing control and trusting in His justice can transform your response to life's challenges from one of fear to one of confidence. God as protector and judge. Psalm 5 presents God in dual roles, as a compassionate protector and an unwavering judge. These two aspects of His nature may seem contradictory, but they create a beautiful tension that brings both comfort and clarity. David doesn't just pray for God to shield him, he asks for God to act as a righteous judge, to bring justice where deceit and wickedness thrive. This duality is essential because while we all long for protection from harm, we also yearn for fairness, a deeper recognition that wrongs will eventually be made right, not by our hands, but by God's perfect wisdom. In David's time, justice was not just sought, it was a life or death necessity. His enemies weren't just critics or rivals, they were individuals actively plotting his downfall. Imagine the anxiety of constantly watching your back, knowing schemes were being devised to destroy your leadership, reputation, and even your life. But in the middle of this chaos, David doesn't take matters into his own hands. He cries out to the ultimate authority, the one judge who cannot be deceived, God. What makes this extraordinary isn't just David's bold request for divine intervention, but the sheer trust behind it. To leave matters of justice entirely in God's hands requires a tremendous act of surrender. Psalm 5 vividly captures this trust when David says, "Not a word from their mouth can be trusted. Their heart is filled with malice. Their throat is an open grave. With their tongues they tell lies." This is an unflinching portrayal of the deceit and hostility he faced. David isn't shy about naming the problem. And there's a lesson here. When we pretend everything is fine or fail to acknowledge the forces working against us, we deny ourselves the opportunity to fully rely on God. It's okay to name the pain. It's okay to admit that the actions of others have hurt you or left you vulnerable. But naming those feelings isn't permission to dwell in them. It's an invitation to release them by lifting them to God. What makes God's judgment so powerful is that it is always fair. Human justice, no matter how advanced or noble, is flawed. Our emotions cloud our decisions. Our perspectives are limited, and too often, our responses to wrongs are driven more by vengeance than by righteousness. But God's judgment is different. It isn't fueled by emotion or skewed by personal bias. He sees what we cannot, and his justice extends not only to the actions of others, but to the condition of their hearts. This is why David doesn't ask for a chance to fight back. He doesn't plot his own revenge or attempt to outwit his enemies. Instead, he asks God to declare them guilty, trusting that divine justice doesn't need his interference. David's faith in God's role as judge is a release. It's a reminder that justice doesn't have to be carried out by us. It isn't our burden. And this release isn't just freeing, it's healing. In this, there's a question for us. How many times have we tried to shoulder the weight of judgment, punishing those who've wronged us through anger, bitterness, or even subtle retaliation? How often do we spend sleepless nights replaying the wrongs done to us, plotting scenarios in our minds where we come out victorious? This isn't just exhausting, it's destructive. When we try to be both protector and judge, we create a burden we weren't designed to carry. David shows us another way through Psalm 5. By placing judgment in God's hands, we allow ourselves to focus on what we're called to do, act with faith, integrity, and trust. Letting go doesn't mean ignoring our pain or pretending injustice doesn't exist. It means giving space for God to act on his timeline, not ours. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of God's dual nature as protector and judge is that protection isn't reserved for those who are perfect. David states, "By your great mercy, I will come into your house." This verse is a significant pivot. It reaffirms a truth that we so easily forget. We are under divine protection not because we are flawless, but because God is merciful. If we had to earn his favor, we would all disqualify ourselves. But David reminds us that approaching God's presence, relying on his shield, and trusting his judgment is a privilege granted through his mercy, not our merit. It's an invitation open to anyone willing to come before him in humility and faith. And yet, protection doesn't come without responsibility. In the same breath that David acknowledges God's protection, he asks, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies, make your way straight before me." God's shield is not a license to act however we please. It's a call to align our lives with his righteousness. Why? Because walking in disobedience creates cracks in our armor. When we engage in gossip, deceit, or revenge, we step out from under his shield and expose ourselves to the very harm we pray to avoid. This is the balance Psalm 5 offers us. Protection and judgment are woven together. God shields his people, but he also leads them into a way of living that reflects his justice. It's not just about being safe from harm. It's about being transformed through it. And in trusting God to be a fair and just judge, we leave room for peace to take hold. In the next topic, we'll explore the resilience that emerges when you choose trust over retaliation. David's example reveals how Psalm 5 transforms pain into spiritual strength, giving us a pathway to grow even in the face of opposition. Resilience in the face of opposition. There's a moment in every challenge when you must decide how you will respond. Will you allow the pain, disappointment, or conflict to shift your identity? Or will you use the very weight of that opposition to build strength, resilience, and clarity? Psalm 5 gives us insight into this critical choice: how to stand firm when life seems determined to knock you down. Resilience is not something that happens automatically. It must be cultivated. And to cultivate it, you need a foundation strong enough to support you even when the ground beneath you feels unstable. For David, that foundation was a deep, unshakable trust in God. He didn't trivialize the difficulties he faced. He fully recognized the malice of his enemies and the damage they were capable of inflicting. However, David did something few of us do naturally. He refused to magnify those challenges beyond their actual size. When opposition creates chaos in our lives, whether through gossip, workplace struggles, or shattered relationships, the natural instinct is to let fear or anger dominate. We replay the hurtful words, relive the betrayal, or stress over situations we can't control. Often, we allow ourselves to become defined by the negativity coming against us. But David calls us to take a different approach, a spiritually grounded way of enduring hardship while protecting our peace. David writes in Psalm 5, "Let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them ever sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you." What David is offering is more than just encouragement. It's a formula for resilience. It begins with where you place your refuge, the place you turn to for safety and strength. Notice that David doesn't internalize the negativity around him. He doesn't carry it in his spirit or allow it to fester. Instead, he transfers the burden to his refuge, God. This transfer requires humility. It's easy to want to fight back, to defend ourselves against slander, to correct the narrative, or to seek justice on our own terms. But when we choose to take refuge in God, we're making a decision that is less about control and more about surrender. That surrender allows joy to take the place of fear. Joy in knowing that the weight of the fight no longer rests on your shoulders. Joy in understanding that your protection isn't contingent on your own strength or strategy, but on the unshakable presence of God. There's something remarkable about David's perspective on opposition. He sees it not as confirmation of his weakness, but as validation of his alignment with God's plan. The attacks against him aren't evidence of defeat. They're evidence of purpose. The same is true for us today. Often being targeted, whether through gossip, criticism, or other forms of negativities, not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're walking in a way that threatens darkness. When faced with opposition, it's easy to focus on the enemy, to see yourself as a victim. But David flips this narrative. In Psalm 5, he centers his attention not on the attackers, but on the one who fights for him. That shift in focus is critical to resilience. The more energy we give to our fears and frustrations, the more power they hold over us. But when we redirect that energy toward God through prayer, gratitude, and trust, we strengthen our ability to endure. Science echoes this spiritual truth. Studies show that gratitude reshapes the brain, reducing stress and increasing resilience. It shifts your perspective from what's going wrong to what's still good, from what you lack to what you've already been given. When David sings for joy, when he rejoices in God's protection, he's not ignoring his challenges, he's reframing them. He's choosing to saturate his mind and spirit with reminders of God's goodness, rather than the negativity around him. David's resilience wasn't passive. It wasn't just about feeling protected. It was about walking in alignment with God's righteousness. He didn't allow opposition to lower his standards or pull him into destructive behavior. Instead, he leaned into the straight path God set before him. This is the heart of resilience, staying true to your values and calling, even when the world tries to drag you off course. Psalm 5 teaches us that resilience is more than survival. It's thriving in the face of adversity by anchoring yourself in truth rather than insecurity. It's about recognizing that every insult, every setback, every challenge becomes an opportunity to deepen your faith and build your inner strength. This doesn't mean the pain disappears or the attacks suddenly stop, It means they lose their power to define you. Resilience is what gives you the courage to face each day with hope, no matter how heavy yesterday may have been. It's about trusting the process even when progress feels slow. It's knowing that there's a purpose in the storm, even if you can't fully see it yet. David trusted that God was making a way for him, even when his enemies seemed to have the upper hand. That trust didn't just sustain him, it transformed him. And the same is true for us. Resilience grows when we commit to walking forward, not because circumstances have improved, but because we trust that God's promises are greater than those circumstances. Psalm 5 calls us to rise above the noise of opposition, to step out from under the weight of negativity, and to step into the strength that only comes from aligning ourselves with God's truth. In the next topic, we'll take this idea further, exploring practical ways to build a spiritual morning routine inspired by Psalm 5. You'll learn how to start your day in a way that not only protects your peace, but strengthens your ability to face whatever comes next. Using prayer as a spiritual morning routine. Every battle begins before the first arrow is launched, before the first move is made. The key to victory often lies in how well you've prepared, not in the moment of trial, but in the hours, even minutes, beforehand. This is the secret David reveals in Psalm 5. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. It's not merely an observation about David's habit of prayer. It's a strategy for spiritual survival. David isn't just praying, he's preparing for battle. The morning sets the tone for the day. How you begin your day often determines how you'll move through its chaos, challenges, and demands. The world will throw distractions, negativity, and frustrations your way. But if your spirit is already aligned with God's truth before you step into the noise, you carry with you something stronger than the chaos. That's why David starts his day with prayer. He isn't waiting for problems to arise. Before seeking God, he's laying his trust, his burdens, and his concerns before the Lord first, knowing that what happens in those quiet early moments will shape his strength for the hours that follow. But what makes this kind of intentional morning prayer so transformative? It's not just the act of repeating words. This isn't about obligation or rote recitation. It's about building a rhythm in your life, a foundation of peace, clarity, and trust that fortifies you against whatever the day may bring. By meeting with God first thing in the morning, David doesn't just ask for protection. He aligns his thoughts, his emotions, and even his plans with divine wisdom. Think about what morning typically looks like for most of us. Many of us wake up with rushing thoughts, urgent tasks, unfinished projects, leftover conflicts from the day before. The phone lights up. Messages demand answers. Social media feeds begin to scream for attention. Before we even take a moment to breathe, we've already surrounded ourselves with pressure and distractions. In that space, it becomes nearly impossible to find clarity or strength to face the inevitable challenges to come. David's words in Psalm 5 offer a simple but life-changing alternative. Instead of stepping into the world frazzled and uncentered, step into the presence of God first. Lay down your requests. Speak to the one who already knows the battles you'll face today. And here's the key: don't rush through it. As David says, wait expectantly. Build your morning routine around the expectation that God is not only listening, but preparing you for the moments ahead. To create a spiritual morning routine inspired by Psalm 5, begin by cultivating gratitude. Even before you speak any requests, start your day by thanking God for what He has already done. Gratitude recalibrates your mind, drawing you away from fear and into recognition of the blessings already in your life. You might thank Him for the gift of another day, for the breath in your lungs, or for the strength you know He will provide. Gratitude isn't simply polite acknowledgement, it's spiritual armor. It opens your heart to God's presence and pushes back against the negativity that often greets us at the start of a new day. Next, bring your concerns to Him. Speak your fears, your anxieties, and your uncertainties out loud. David does not hold back in his prayer. He freely expresses his frustrations and worries, laying them bare before his Creator. This honest communication is not a sign of weakness, it's a release. Why? Because naming your burdens and placing them in the hands of God empties you of the weight you were never meant to carry alone. It's a process of surrender. But don't stop there. After gratitude and surrender, ask for guidance. As David prays, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness. Make your way straight before me." Guidance doesn't just mean asking for clarity in major decisions or resolving conflicts. It's asking God to illuminate His truth in the ordinary and mundane moments of the day, to help you respond to challenges with grace, to choose faith over fear, and to stay aligned with His will even when distractions try to pull you away. Finally, leave room for quiet. Wait expectantly doesn't just mean asking God to act. It means pausing long enough to sense His response. Maybe it's a verse that speaks to your heart in the stillness, or just a deepening peace that promises He is already at work. Sitting in that quiet moment builds trust. It reminds you that even when you cannot yet see what God is doing, you can rest knowing He is preparing the way ahead of you. A spiritual morning routine isn't about the amount of time you spend or the exact words you say. It's about intentionally setting your heart in the right direction before stepping out into the world. Even 5 or 10 minutes of focused, conscious prayer can change the trajectory of your entire day. When you center your morning around Psalm 5, you walk forward differently, not burdened by insecurities or wrapped in doubt, but shielded by confidence and clarity. Imagine walking into your workplace knowing you've already entrusted your day to the God who fights your battles. Imagine engaging in difficult conversations with the assurance that God's wisdom is guiding your words. Imagine facing an overwhelming schedule with peace, knowing there's nothing in the day that God hasn't already seen and planned for. This is what prayer as preparation looks like. In the next topic, we'll bring this idea of preparation to life through real-world stories of individuals who've seen the power of trusting God with their mornings. These testimonies will show that what David lived in ancient times remains just as transformative for us today. Real testimonies of faith and deliverance. Lessons become most powerful when they are no longer abstract ideas, but lived realities. That's the gift of testimonies. They take the intangible and bring it to life. They show us that the promises of Psalm 5 are not distant concepts reserved for the past. They are truths unfolding here and now, shaping lives in profound and tangible ways. When we hear how others have trusted God as their shield and source of justice, we see not only the strength of their faith, but the unchanging power of the God who acted in David's life and continues to act in ours. Consider the story of Sarah, a young professional navigating the relentless pressures of a corporate environment. Sarah had worked hard to build her reputation, establishing herself as both competent and trustworthy. But it only took one colleague's jealousy and a few whispered lies to place that reputation under fire. Through no fault of her own, Sarah found herself the subject of gossip, her name dragged into baseless accusations. She could feel the poisonous effects of the tension in once friendly interactions, the anxious glances from co-workers who doubted her integrity. Frustration turned to anger, and soon that anger morphed into sleepless nights filled with thoughts of how she could defend herself or retaliate. But Sarah remembered Psalm 5, one Monday morning, utterly depleted. She opened those ancient words and prayed them aloud. "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness, because of my enemies. Make your ways straight before me." For the first time in days, Sarah's racing thoughts slowed. She realized that while she couldn't control the rumors, she could control where she placed her focus. She began starting each morning by surrendering the situation to God, asking Him to protect her, guide her actions, and reveal the truth in His perfect timing. What happened next wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. Over the following weeks, as Sarah chose peace over retaliation, her character spoke louder than the rumors. While gossip can travel far, actions travel deeper. The very same co-workers who doubted her at first began to see through the lies as Sarah maintained her integrity with silent strength. Eventually, the truth surfaced, and Sarah's reputation was not only restored but bolstered. The incident became a personal testimony of how surrendering to God's righteousness and trusting His justice brought peace, clarity, and ultimately vindication. Then there's the story of Michael, a father of 3 who owned a small business in his community. He prided himself on running an honest company built on mutual respect with his clients. But one day, an unforeseen legal dispute arose, a baseless accusation from a customer fueled by misunderstanding and hostility. Michael felt cornered, powerless against a system that seemed to favor the loudest voice over the truth. The case dragged on for months, draining his energy and finances. Michael found solace one evening while reading through Psalm 5 with his family. The verse, "Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield," stirred something in him. Instead of being consumed by fear of the courts or resentment toward the accuser, Michael chose to pray daily for God's protection over his business, his family, and even his accuser. He asked for God's favor to shield him, not necessarily from the problem itself, but from the despair and anger that threatened to take hold of his heart. In the months ahead, something remarkable happened. Michael's ability to walk through the trial with peace was noticed not just by his family, but even by the parties involved in the dispute. His quiet confidence and refusal to engage in hostility stood out. Eventually, the case was resolved in his favor, but more importantly, the testimony of his faith left a lasting impression. His staff saw his resilience as evidence of a deeper strength, and his accuser, moved by Michael's grace, later apologized for escalating the matter. What these stories teach us is that Psalm 5 is not just about supernatural intervention or sudden miracles. Sometimes, God doesn't immediately remove the opposition in our lives, but He transforms us in the process, giving us the strength to go through the fire without being consumed by it. Protection doesn't always mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of peace in the midst of it. These testimonies also highlight an essential truth. Our response to opposition can reflect God's light to others. When we stop trying to fight battles in our own strength and instead lean into His shield, we not only protect ourselves, but become living examples of His grace and power. Sarah's co-workers, Michael's staff, and even his accuser didn't just see people rising above challenges. They saw the evidence of God at work in their lives. Your own story could carry the same power. Maybe you're in the middle of a battle right now. Maybe the whispers of gossip or the actions of others have created wounds too deep to describe. Wherever you are, Psalm 5 offers a path forward. It's not a promise of instant resolution, but of a God who walks with you, who shields you, and who works even through the hidden moments to bring justice, restoration, and peace. In the next topic, we'll bridge these stories of faith with something practical. understanding the connection between spirituality and modern science. You'll learn how prayer and trust not only restore your soul, but also produce real, measurable changes in your mental and emotional well-being, equipping you for the challenges of today's complex world. The science of faith, how prayer and trust transform your mind and emotions. Faith has often been framed as a deeply personal, spiritual act, and it is. But what if we told you that trusting God and engaging in regular prayer doesn't just transform your soul, it actually rewires your mind and emotions in measurable, tangible ways? The ancient wisdom of Psalm 5 couldn't have been more aligned with modern revelations in neuroscience and psychology. When David prayed, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness. Make your way straight before me," he wasn't just speaking to his spiritual reality. He was also, without realizing it, practicing habits that neurologically and emotionally fortify us against the stresses of life. To begin, we need to address one essential element: the impact of stress. Stress is the enemy of peace. It triggers the brain to focus on survival, narrowing your ability to problem solve, to feel joy, or to act out of compassion. Chronic stress releases a hormone called cortisol naturally, occurring chemical that sharpens your focus temporarily but wreaks havoc if left unchecked. Prolonged exposure to cortisol has been linked to anxiety, depression, and even physical ailments such as high blood pressure and heart disease. Now, what does Psalm 5 have to do with any of this? Quite a lot. Prayer, especially the kind of intentional, honest, and focused prayer that David practiced, has been shown in countless scientific studies to dismantle stress at its roots. When you pray, especially in the quiet moments of the morning, your brain shifts out of heightened fight-or-flight mode and into a state of rest. Prayer lowers cortisol levels almost immediately because it creates both focus and release. As David laid his requests before God and waited expectantly, he was engaging in what we now understand to be a deeply soothing mental practice. But that's just the beginning. Gratitude, a vital theme woven throughout Psalm 5, is another invaluable tool. When David thanks God for being both shield and judge, he is recalibrating his mind to focus on divine provision rather than human attacks. Neuroscience backs this up. Gratitude activates the brain's reward system, releasing serotonin and dopamine, the feel-good chemicals that combat anxiety and depression. Practicing gratitude on a daily basis doesn't just change your mood. It strengthens neural pathways in your brain, making you more resilient against stress over time. Another fascinating element of prayer, as demonstrated in Psalm 5, is its ability to restore a sense of control. David's words highlight what so many of us struggle with: our fear of uncertainty. When life feels unpredictable, unanswered questions can dominate our thoughts, stealing our peace and feeding our anxiety. What prayer does, especially when we surrender our fears to God, is give us clarity about what we can and cannot control. By saying, "Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield." David is reminding himself of a truth that still holds today. God is in control, and the outcome of our battles rests in his hands, not ours. Modern research confirms this benefit. Studies have shown that prayer enhances what psychologists call locus of control, sense of ownership over your responses to life's challenges. This doesn't mean life becomes easier or setbacks go away automatically. It means that through prayer, our ability to respond with calm and wisdom increases. We are no longer just reacting in fear or frustration. We are acting from a place of trust. But perhaps the most extraordinary element of prayer is its ability to transform not only the one who prays, but also those around them. In one famous study from Duke University, researchers found that individuals who prayed regularly developed greater empathy and kindness, not just toward their friends and family, but even toward those they considered rivals or enemies. This aligns with David's repeated focus on God's justice rather than personal revenge. By turning over his frustrations to God, he made space for peace and clarity where bitterness could have taken root. Engaging deeply with Psalm 5 and incorporating its truths into your own prayer life doesn't just keep stress at bay, it equips you to live differently. Imagine starting each day with a focus on God, releasing your fears, and trusting His justice over your need for retaliation. You're not simply surviving challenges, but transforming your ability to approach them with a calm resilience rooted in both faith and biology. The practical steps Psalm 5 outlines are deceptively simple. Begin your day with prayer. Be honest about your emotions, from joy to sorrow, from fear to anger. Express your dependence on God and shift your focus from what's threatening you to the one who protects you. Wrap that prayer time in gratitude, naming what you know God has already done in your life and expressing faith in what He will do. Finally, as David says, wait expectantly, don't rush. Let your trust in God rewrite the way your mind approaches the day ahead. If we take just a moment to root ourselves in these truths, even the smallest disruptions lose their power to inflict deep harm. Imagine it, the next time gossip flares up around you, instead of immediately feeling anger or defensiveness, you pause. You remember Psalm 5. You know God's promises apply as much to you as they did to David. The situation may not change in the moment, but your brain is no longer wired to panic. You are emotionally and spiritually protected. David knew something many of us forget in today's fast-paced, pressure-filled world. Prayer isn't just a spiritual practice. It's a shield for your soul, your mind, and even your body. Psalm 5 reminds us that trust in God not only fortifies our faith, but also cultivates mental clarity and emotional resilience in situations where we would otherwise feel overwhelmed. In the next topic, we'll bring this conversation full circle, leading into a beautiful affirmation of God's promises from Psalm 5. We'll close this series with a prayer and an invitation to live each day trusting in the divine shield of protection that no negativity or attack can penetrate. Living under the divine shield, a daily invitation. Psalm 5 is not merely a historical prayer. It's a living invitation, a promise that stretches across time, offering modern believers the same protection it gave David. It is a call not to security as the world defines it, but to a deeper kind of peace, one that cannot be shaken by external events or internal fears. It's an opportunity to wake up each day knowing that you are not alone, that you are entering the day equipped with a shield far stronger than anything the world can throw at you. But to live under that shield requires more than acknowledgement. It requires alignment. Living under God's divine protection doesn't mean hardship disappears or that challenges stop coming altogether. It means those challenges lose their ability to define or destroy you. This kind of spiritual resilience begins with recognizing the deeper reality Psalm 5 presents. God is always with you, and His shield is not a distant promise, but a present reality for those who seek it. David's words echo this truth continuously, not as an abstract idea, but as an actual way of living. Surely, Lord, you bless the righteous. You surround them with your favor as with a shield. This wasn't optimism or mere encouragement. It was a declaration of fact. To live under the divine shield means choosing where your focus lies. David understood this intuitively, which is why his prayer begins with such intentionality. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you and wait expectantly. David begins his day not with the weight of his enemies, plans pressing on him, but with the assurance of God's presence guiding him. His focus is vertical, centered on divine wisdom and protection rather than horizontal, constantly reacting to the noise of the world around him. This is a daily decision we must make. Who will we allow to dictate the way we move through life? The chaos of the world or the peace of God? But it's not just about focus, it's also about trust. Living under God's shield is ultimately an act of surrender. When David prays, "Lead me, Lord, in your righteousness. Make your way straight before me," he is relinquishing control. He doesn't dictate the terms of his protection. He doesn't demand specific outcomes. Instead, he acknowledges that God's way is better, even if it doesn't always align with his immediate desires or timelines. Trust like this requires humility, a willingness to admit that you don't have all the answers and that your strength is not enough. It flies in the face of our modern, self-reliant culture and calls us to embrace the vulnerability of dependence on God. That surrender isn't a sign of weakness, far from it. It's where true strength is found, because it allows you to step back and let God take the lead. Too often, we exhaust ourselves fighting battles that were never ours to fight. We replay conversations, strategize comebacks, or try to control outcomes through sheer willpower. But Psalm 5 reminds us that God doesn't ask us to carry these burdens. He simply asks us to trust Him, to bring our concerns to Him honestly and leave them at His feet. And what happens when we do? We become untouchable, not in the sense that life becomes perfect, but in the sense that the negativity around us can no longer invade the peace within us. The attacks may still come, words may still be spoken, situations may still arise, but the outflow of your heart will no longer depend on those external realities. It will depend solely on the God who shields you, the God who walks before you and behind you, the God who hems you in on all sides. This is why Psalm 5 ends with such profound assurance. But let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them ever sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you. Notice the joy here. It's not reserved for easier days or quieter seasons. It's a joy that exists in the middle of life's messiest, most chaotic moments. It's a joy rooted not in circumstances, but in the unshakable presence of God. Imagine living each day with that kind of peace, waking up not with dread weighing on your chest, but with the quiet confidence that God's favor surrounds you as surely as the air you breathe. Imagine stepping into difficult conversations without fear, knowing that no word spoken against you can change who you are in God's eyes. Imagine facing uncertainty with courage, trusting that every step you take is guided by a wisdom far greater than your own. This is the invitation Psalm 5 extends to you. It's not something reserved for special occasions or particular moments of crisis. It's a daily practice, a way of being that transforms how you approach every aspect of your life. The psalm asks us to start our mornings by coming to God, honestly laying our fears, our hopes, and our plans before Him. It invites us to stay rooted in gratitude, to rejoice not only in what God has already done, but in the promises we can trust Him to fulfill. Living under God's shield isn't about earning His protection or perfection. It's about abiding in His presence. It's about letting His truth shape how you respond to life, how you treat others, and how you see yourself. The shield of God's favor is not just a defense against enemies. It's a declaration of your identity as someone deeply loved, deeply seen, and deeply cared for by the one who controls it all. As we close, let this be your prayer. Lord, let my life start and end with a trust in you. Guard not only my steps, but my heart. Be my shield in every season against the negativity around me and the doubts within. Lead me, guide me, and remind me daily that no attack can breach the favor you have surrounded me with. In you, I will place my trust this day and always. The divine shield David spoke of in Psalm 5 is still here, waiting for you to step into it. Will you choose to live each day under its protection? The choice is yours, and what waits on the other side is a life fortified by peace, courage, and unshakable trust.